Okay, we are now going to start by building the most basic Flask application, but we're going to practice setting up the development environment so you know what it takes in order to set up the workspace necessary to build one of these apps as well. So really, the building the app itself is going to take 2 seconds. The real challenge here is setting things up so that we can use Python and the Flask framework to build a very simple app that we'll be able to see. So we are going to use cloud9.io, something that's changed in the midst of changing. So this process is likely going to alter, but that's going to be true for almost all of this. We'll try to keep this up to date, but it's going to vary a lot, and there's going to be adaptations necessary along almost every step. That's just the nature of the beast. Okay, so go ahead and set things up as you see it here. If you're in my class, we're going to set it up in the team workspace so I can see your project. We are not going to select Python. We'll just keep it at a super basic template because we'll need to install everything ourselves anyway. So we're going to be working with our terminal, so let's bring this up to the main window. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. Okay. Um, So that is the Linux terminal, and so you should know these commands. If you don't know, you should practice them and help add to the notes here. Um, what we need to first do is set up our virtual environment, and that starts with this command. So sudo means this is actions you want to do as the super user. And so this is giving a lot of authority to make changes to the machine. You're using the app installer, so think of it like the built-in Linux app store of sorts. And update means that you want to update all of the links that apt-get will use in order to download apps. So this is just something that you should usually do if you're starting to work in a terminal environment, just so that your tool set, your toolkit is up to date with the latest links. So we just type that in as a terminal command and let her rip. And this will take a minute. While it does that, I'll point out that the next set of installation instructions, this is an extra complicated method. Normally, you can just use sudo apt-get and then install Python 3.6. But that has been proven to be somewhat difficult. When I use it, when I do that here, it doesn't seem to work as well. There's some sort of problem with the binary files that get developed. I haven't investigated it enough, but these steps work just fine, so I haven't really solved the problem. Instead, I just found an easy solution to work around it, and that's to download the installation file manually from this hosting site, and then use the command to unzip the file. You can see that I just downloaded it here, and I'm unzipping it into this folder here, and then I'm going to use this command to go into the folder and look what's inside. I can also do that just by looking in here. But what I need to run the command that's described here is to compile the configure file, and so it's ready to be run as an executable. That's what that command does. And then I will so actually, no, I'm sorry. That's I have that the other way around. This is actually executing the configure script, and then this is telling us to build the install. The process will take a while, and you might get some funny errors. These are all things that um, I largely follow from Stack Overflow. So the details about why things are happening is something that I am intensely curious about myself, and I have not found suitable sorts of answers to exactly understand some of these responses. I can see that it's compiling them into .c files. So you should know that Python is essentially a wrapper, or it stands on top of the language of C. And so all of the things that we do compile down to the language of C. And so you can see that it's doing a lot in order to install and set up Python with C. But there seems to be some issues with this process. I have not found any, though there are all of this feedback, I haven't found that it causes any issues. But there are a million other ways to set this kind of thing up, and you can feel free to improve upon this method. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is just set up a virtual environment so that we can use our dependencies responsibly, so that rather than installing files for the whole system, that we're installing the libraries that our app will need into a controllable folder that we can activate when we work on our app. And so now that our install is done, we can back out of this folder, tell it to make a virtual environment named venvironment in this path. And there it is. And so now I should be able to activate it. Source virtual environment bin activate. And now you can see that this means that it's active. So if I install anything, it will be installed inside this virtual environment folder, where you will see that I also have Python and all my Python libraries. And I want to add to that Python library, but before I do, I can get rid of some of these files. So I don't need that anymore. This folder will have been here, so rm, actually I'll need sudo powers since I installed this. rm/rf, and then Python, press tab to autocomplete, and you're gone. Cool. Now I can do pip install Flask. That will install the Flask app, and these are the Flask app's dependencies. And so now you can see that inside this I have the Flask and other modules that Flask depends on. And now I don't need this either. That came with the HTML starting point. So now what I'm ready to do is build my first app. And so normally we would create a folder, project file, particular for my project here, and I might even keep the virtual environment inside that project folder. But since this is going to be a one-file project, I'm just going to say start a new file, and I can call it hello flask.py. I could have also done that with a like a touch command, so I could have done like touch python.py. How about hello flask.py, and that would have also created the file. And either way, I now need to edit that file, and I'm going to paste in the code that I'm listed here. And what this does is I import the operating system library, which is a tool that I'm going to use to look up my own IP. And if it fails to look up my own IP, it just uses this one. And I also use that to look up the port for my host, which is something called WordSurg. You can see that it installed here, WordSurg. It's a built-in little mini server that will host my Flask app. Let's see. I'm also setting some options, and then I'm telling my app to run. My app, by the way, is created right here, and this is a variable. I can change all of these to something stupid if I was so inclined. It would work just fine. And this is saying create a new instance of Flask, which I'm importing the object Flask from the library Flask. And I'm calling the constructor or the init method into action, and I'm passing it my current namespace or my current work environment. What's being done here is a clever thing that you'll see frequently throughout Python, and it's saying only run this code if I've chosen this particular file as my main app, as as this is the one that I've called into action. So what it'll help prevent is that if I linked this file to a different app, it wouldn't automatically start up the server by mistake. It'll only do that if I choose to run this script in particular, not just link or reference to it. Okay, and so in between here is my only app route. And route is a key service, a key factor of an app, and that's to take the request to my home page and direct it somewhere. And I don't need to name it index, it just makes sense because it's the home page or the index page. And all I'm doing is returning a string or a bunch of words that say hello. So now if I run this thing, so I'll be able to do Python. I'll tell the Python interpreter to please execute hello, and I'll press tab to auto finish hello flask.py. And now the Python interpreter, and it'll be the Python version that I wanted because my virtual environment's up, will now execute this this file, and it's starting up that server. And here's the IP address. And so if I open this, I'll see hello from Flask. And now you've created your first Flask app. So we're going to fill in this information in class. What is missing from this little miniature app? Well, there are no pages. All it is I return this one string that I see from here. So in a normal app, instead of returning just a bunch of text, we render a template. So we'll have an HTML file with a little bit of Jinja Python code, and that will get rendered or boiled down into a bunch of HTML that has my template view. It'll be a nice display for my user. So there are no pages here. It's just returning that. In addition, there's no database. Now I could use a SQLite database, which is like a temporary SQL database that doesn't really get saved so much. So I could use a database, or I could create a larger one that'll persist and write down all of the information that I need. But right now, nothing is sort of being saved at all. And the other thing is that there is no interactivity. Right now, all that you see is that when I go to this page, I get a GET request. I only am requesting information from the server to my computer, so I can see it here. I'm not submitting any information. There's no interactivity. It's just a view only of this one message. So that's severely limited. So those are some of the broad strokes of what we're missing here. We're also missing a whole host of libraries that we haven't installed. So there's a number of things that we're going to use later on that aren't put in our virtual environment at the moment. So we'll add those as we want to add more features and like management tools and all security. As we do all of these added features, we'll add more libraries and add more code.